If you haven't taken a look, we've also shared the playlist of some of the past MAS Imagers group meetings, so you can start kind of chipping away at those. Some of them are pretty advanced. We had a mix of some, newer members joining and talked about newer topics. So they kind of run the gamut. Take a look. For example, we have one member, Gabe. If you've met him yet, he does programming on Astro Imaging Planner. So I think a few of the people, just judging from the conversations, might be interested in getting that hooked up and whatnot. We have a number of members with a lot of interest here, so it's good to see everyone. I mean, it's a benefit of being a part of the Astronomical League and being able to benefit from two 90-year-old plus organizations in Wisconsin. Inevitable we cross paths with each other, so this is first of many, I hope. So right now I'm talking as I get my screen up. So along with being in this Imagers group, one of the things we also want to share too is our Slack space. Slack is something that you can install as a desktop application. So yes, and there's a question, link our YouTube channel with recording. Okay, yeah, we have a link to our channel. We could certainly share out to our members through the MAS channel too. Right now, what I'm going to do is send an invite in the group chats. So this, if you haven't joined yet, is the invite to join the Southeast Wisconsin Imagers Slack group, which I'm presenting here. I highly recommend this because once this meeting is over, this is a monthly meeting, and it's a great opportunity to remain in touch with everyone in this call. And Slack is more of a chat application. It's not necessarily a tool that you open once and come back to it in 2 months or something. It's something that's really designed around chat and communication. So I wanted to give you a couple of tips when you're navigating that space. Now that you're part of the Imagers group, the next step is kind of follow up with conversations and introductions. So when you first join, you're going to be presented. Everyone joins in Slack in the general channel. And the thing to remember about Slack is, and thanks, you can see, I see notices somebody joins here, maybe not, it was a popover. But when you first join, you're going to go in general announcements. Don't just sit there in general. That's my biggest takeaway for Slack. Slack is channel based. So you can see my mouse here. When you join, immediately I would, if I were you, I would go to browse all channels. And I would just start clicking away and joining all of our channels in our group. It's not very big. Just join them all. There's no reason not to. If you don't like one or it's off topic, you can always leave. So this is, for random, for example. That one's often off topic and it's just hijinks. But for the most part, we have a number of channels that talk about a number of topics. I'm just going off of our conversations I heard. We talked about DIY projects. We have a DIY telescope channel. In fact, I've been using it to chat about 3D printing a Hadley telescope, and one of our members is using AstroPi. I believe it's the Linux version of imaging software, totally DIY. It's also a great opportunity for those of you who 3D print and might get involved in accessories for your telescope that are just hard to find, and it might be easier just to print it. So a lot of advice in there. We're kind of building it up, but even our MAS Milwaukee members who aren't in these channels, I'd highly recommend joining them. We also have Aurora alerts. So we have a bot kind of hooked up. Anytime we get high KP numbers, it's going to notify you. So be aware of that. That's more of a bot channel. You can leave if you don't like it or ignore it. Processing. So we talked about a lot of things related to Astro Pixel Processor, PixInsight, you name it. Serial is another one that I'd love to learn someday, to learn more about it. I know Gabe uses it, a few other people. You know, anything to do with processing, join that channel. I've more than once. In fact, we talked about Chad. One of the conversations I remember, I was using the ASI 2600 MC, and I just wanted, you know, to compare workflows. Like, I go through this workflow and Fix Insight, you know, what do you recommend? And he was ready to name off all of his, you know, workflows and processes that he would take through before and after that stretch. So there's a ton of people who have a wealth of knowledge in Astro image processing. So that's where you kind of talk in that channel. We have others, EIA and visual, so a lot of C-Star users. I use the Unistellar EV scope myself, very similar principle. I do a lot of EIA with it, so that's when you just want to share what you're looking at and browsing. Often you'll find other people up at night at the same time as you, so sometimes it might initiate a conversation of what you're looking at or things you're going to go to. Also, I added visual in there just for those of you who you might use EIA as a way to work in tandem with visual, or just you want to talk about some visual stuff yourself. Science projects, that channel will mostly talk about how we're using imaging for science. So I think there's a lot of talk right now about nanograv or the pulsar you know, project. We also used to talk about unistellar stuff. And our other popular channel, Deep Sky. So if you're going out and you just want to have a call out, is anyone out tonight? I'm having a problem. Or is anyone out just looking at Deep Sky? That tends to be where a lot of our conversations wind up being split between that in general. And then the other thing too, imaging here. So if you're debating something or want to see if anyone else has that gear like you, join that channel. So you see here it says joined in all of them because I just joined them all, and then you chat through here. Most of us who use I guess I shouldn't speak for most of us, but a lot of people I know who use Slack, we have it on our phones too, the application. That way it's a way you can use this chat app when you're in the field, and it's not just desktop based. I'd highly recommend getting their application on Android or Apple. You know, make sure you add all of your channels. Then once you join, so you can access them, and all of your different groups that you're in. And that's the big thing to keep in mind. If you're in multiple groups, like I have this at work, I log in my personal Slack, so I just have all my different personal Slacks that I can go to. But then once you're in the Southeastern Wisconsin Astro Imagers group, you're in there, and you'll see your channels that you join. So, for example, general announcements, you come in, and you can see all of our general stuff that we talk about. But if you want to hop over to the other channels, we're talking a lot more in others too. So oftentimes we try to organize it, but it might be you know, just different stuff that we're talking about that kind of relates. So the biggest takeaway is just join. Also too, if you are replying to something, one thing that we notice a lot in Slack is people talking over each other. So a key takeaway when you're kind of wanting to reply to something would be, I'm saying this because I'm guilty of that here. Todd was asking about this one ad. So what you could do is reply in thread, and then that opens up a new section. And now you can talk you know, in that one area without kind of flooding the chat and then changing the topic for everyone. And you need to scroll up again to see. So little etiquette, some tips. If you want to at somebody, you can just type their at and then the name of, you know, somebody you want to specifically talk to. Click, and then you can send to. Slack also has direct messaging if you need to reach out directly to somebody. But so if I would add somebody, what it's going to do is create a notification, and then that person would see that they're being pinged, and they'd be able to come in and talk to you a little quicker. So that's another technique to keep in mind. You can also save posts for later if you intend to come back to it. So up on the top, if you're following my mouse, there's a few things you can do when you select a thread. So be aware of that. I'm not going to go through all of them. But yeah, I mean, generally you get a sense. We have MAS might be confusing. This is generally for the Milwaukee Astronomical Society, but you know, if you start joining there, no big problem. Planetary tends to be for planetary images that we're taking. If we're out for the night, we might be having discussions on something that we're imaging. I'd love to see more people in here collaborating. It's something that is a lot of fun to do, planetary imaging. If you're doing solar imaging, there's just all kinds of people sharing different stuff, and it comes in waves. Sometimes people have a little more time. They might be on Slack, and you might see a bunch of conversations from one person or another, but just stay active. When I've introduced Slack to a lot of people at the Milwaukee Astronomical Society, I see people join, but then I don't see interaction. And this is an app that thrives on interaction, conversations, and continuing to really bring those conversations in, or ideas. So, and then here when we're talking about science, we're going through some of our results, but oftentimes you're going to see a lot of unistellar EV scope posts. Since here at the Milwaukee Astronomical Society, we have 2 at the club, and often we're talking about some of the stuff we're doing there. But like, we're also trying to bring in occultations, that might be done not with the unistellar app or exoplanet data processing. So if anyone is trying to use maybe AstroImageJ or Exotic to get some of their data and extrapolate it, it's kind of a great spot to talk about that kind of stuff. So I think I've talked about the big ones. Deep Sky is one where if you're out at night and want to chat, oftentimes it's a great space. I can't really think of anything more to say other than just be active. And Slack is a great opportunity now for you to continue that conversation from wherever your location is. So that link that I gave you, if you didn't save it in the chat, I would copy it maybe and paste it somewhere and come back to it, because after this is over, it's going to go away in your Slack window or in your Google Meet window. Otherwise, we do have the there is a I don't know. It's too long to post here, show on the screen. But anyway, just join the link, and I hope to see you chatting on Slack. If you have any questions, you can always email me, or email Lawrence if you have a question on what we just talked about, and we'll get you a good answer to you if you're trying to join or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I might add, Matt. One of the nice things about, especially if we're talking about processing issues, unlike emails, well, you can drop. In fact, I've never really hit a limit yet. So you can drop a raw fit file into. You can drag and drop images into Slack. And so if you're having some processing issues and you want somebody to look at a raw sub, or Slack really takes some pretty large files. Matt, do you know if there's a limit on the size?
We have a free version, so it's not a professional version, but if we keep using it, who knows? But you can drop the files, but what's going to happen in Slack is eventually, after a certain number of days, that history is going to, because it's a chat app, we don't have a pro version, so it's not going to store. Mm-hmm. So it's just in that case, hosting something on a shared Google Drive or something, you can host it and then share out the link and use Slack to kind of real-time communicate through there. And I'd say since we're all joining to the Southeastern Wisconsin Astro Imagers group, which I guess we should think of renaming, but whatever. It's been this way a while. The thing to keep in mind too is just talk to everyone, you know, in the full channel before you drill down and ask, you know, center on asking one person only a question, because maybe somebody else you don't know would be online and they have experience. So kind of use those channels to kind of get to know people's interests or equipment they might have. So
good. And for those you know, again, working late at night, it's amazing how many folks are, you know, tuned into Slack while they're imaging. And so if you got a problem that arises, post it on Slack, whether you know whether you're doing deep sky or planetary or whatever. The likelihood of somebody actually being on the other end is pretty high. So so if you're lonely, you can actually go to Slack while you're imaging and chat with folks as well. All right, Matt. So where are we on the agenda? Do we have any other topics to cover? Or?
I think we covered a lot of the project stuff and when we introduced equipment and whatnot. By the way, I guess I didn't introduce my equipment. I do a lot of one-shot work. I use a lot of Vixen telescopes. Really like the brand. It's a kind of a cross of a Japanese kind of telescope, but with that comes different threats. So if anyone's having threading issues related to Japanese or German telescope, I might have faced a problem or bugged somebody else about it that I would now answer. So, but yeah, I think at this point, Dennis, it's on you and the presentation for tonight. So
okay,
take it away.
All right. Well, about 6 months ago, I was getting pretty frustrated. You know, it'd be clear during the day, and then of course in the evening, clouds would come rolling in, and we have several very high-end solar imagers in the Milwaukee club, and so again, I was led astray and started to look into putting in a solar telescope, piggyback onto my deep sky telescope. And so this is a relatively new process for me, and it's been pretty exciting. I gave a longer version talk of this to Marquette on Friday of last week, and so I shortened it because I figured, you know, after all of these introductions, I was hoping for this kind of a real large turnout, and so I went in and kind of reduced the size of my presentation by you know, a significant amount. So so what I'm going to do is just give a you know, a quick overview of the kind of solar imaging you can do. What is some of the physics behind what you're imaging, and then I can just kind of walk you through what I did is to save some money, is put together and built my own solar scope versus buying a completed package, you know, off the shelf. All right, so let me share a screen here. Entire screen. All right. All right. So can everybody see my screen?
I think you're sharing the wrong screen.
I'm sharing the wrong screen. Okay.
You're sharing the chat screen. Yeah.
I'm sharing the chat screen. Interesting. All right. So let me try that again. All right, I think I got it this time. How about now?
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Much more better.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Okay. So let me get into the. All right. So I'm gonna. I kind of you know. I'm assuming that everybody kind of knows a lot about the sun already. When I give this talk to a more general audience, I have 4 or 5 slides just introducing the sun. But with this group, I figure we can just kind of just jump right into the pot here. So let me just hide that little message. So what parts of the sun do we actually image? And so just a quick review here. So the sun's imaging layers, and I'm going to go into a little more detail in a minute. But we certainly start at the surface of the sun, or the photosphere, which is about 300 miles deep. It's really the brightest portion of the sun, and it is essentially the home for these what you see, these granules and sunspots. One of the amazing thing, I've got some close-up shots of these granules, and you have to keep in mind that everything is supersized on the sun. These granules are literally over 600 miles across. I mean, picture looking at each one of these granules as individual little states of Texas. So these granules are huge. Where a lot of the action is, and unless you make certain investments in a solar scope, you won't see the chromosphere because the photosphere is so dominating with respect to broadband white light. But above the photosphere is really where a lot of the action is at, and I find the most exciting portion of the sun's atmosphere. And it's about 1,200 miles deep, and this is where we get all of the really strong H-alpha emissions. The interesting thing about the chromosphere, and this steps through all the layers all the way out to the corona, is unlike a campfire, the farther away you get from the surface of the sun, the hotter that region is. And we've got lots of hypotheses about how and why that happens. We're not going to go into that physics tonight, but the chromosphere, and I apologize, I just did this talk to a public group, so I converted all my centigrades to Fahrenheits. So the photosphere is about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you go up about 1,000 miles, and now the temperature is 5 times hotter. It's 50,000 degrees. And then you take that next step into the corona, which extends over 1 million miles into space, and that's that spectacular view that you see during a total eclipse, like the one coming up in April of 2024. And then now you're talking about 2.5 million degrees Fahrenheit, 250 times hotter than the photosphere. So these are the kinds of things that we can image, and I'm just going to go through what the setup is, what kind of equipment you can use to look at these various layers of the sun. The other thing too is I always tell my students I enjoy having interaction with my group, and so if you've got a question during the presentations, you don't have to save it to the very end. You might forget it, or the dog may need to go outside or something. But so if there's something that you want me to drill down on a little bit more, just feel free to interrupt me. That is more than fine. So let's look at some of the really interesting features that we're going to be imaging. Of course, one of the most exciting, which rises well above the chromosphere, tens of thousands of miles into the corona. I always like this shot because with the picture of the Earth to scale, just to give you an idea of just how big these prominences are. And of course, we all know that the sun is got a very complex and very complicated magnetic field. It's very there's the sun rotates at different speeds, and then you got internal rotation, and so all of this, and it's all charged particles, right? And we all know from our basic physics that moving charged particles generate magnetic fields, and so we get these huge complex magnetic fields around the sun, and these magnetic fields literally pick up the charged particles and present them as these beautiful prominences. So what you're looking at here are magnetic field lines, just as if you took a little magnet on a piece of paper and you put those metal filings down. The charged particles from the chromosphere and the photosphere are following these and being lifted up away from the sun in these huge magnetic loops. This is actually one of my images that I took a little while ago that shows a lot of these features. So you can see the prominences. Interesting enough, and this I don't know what the history is here, but if you look at a prominence on edge, as you see in the lower left corner, we call it a prominence. But if you're looking at the same prominence, but with the sun in the background, we call it a filament. Okay, but when you see filaments, they are in fact prominences just being looked at from a different perspective. And of course, we're all very familiar with sunspots, and then you see scattered mainly around the origin of filaments or prominences and around the sunspots. Intensified activity, we call those flage areas, and you will see those predominantly scattered throughout the image. Now, what we're looking at here, of course, is the chromosphere, and I'll show you in a few slides how you can actually take pictures like this. It's amazing now that from the backyard of an amateur astronomer that you can get such high quality images of the sun. When I show these images to my neighbors, they just can't believe what they're actually looking at. And of course, the things, one of the events that is actually pretty devastating to us on Earth, if it in fact hits us straight on, is someplace in the chromosphere, and usually it happens in the lower portion of the corona, but you have these coronal mass ejections where literally these huge prominences break away. They snap away from the sun and start traveling at about 1 million miles an hour towards outer space, and if we're in the path of one of these CMEs, it is just absolutely devastating. This is literally a chunk of the sun that is heading towards us, and with very high energy content, not only of charged particles, but also X-rays and even some gamma rays. And so it'd be literally like somebody taking a chunk of the sun and throwing it and hitting the Earth with all of this energy. Luckily, our magnetic field, helps divert, this pattern of this energy field. And of course, we see really strong bursts in the form of auroras. Everybody thinks auroras are very attractive, and there's people that chase auroras, but it's really radiation that is breaking through our magnetic field and ionizing the gases in our atmosphere, and some of that radiation actually hits the ground underneath the aurora. So every time auroras are romanticized, I think of the physics behind it, and the last place I want to be standing is under an aurora. Okay, so the other really violent explosions on the sun are called solar flares. These are very hard to catch. I have never imaged one. They don't last very long. They last anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 or 20 minutes. But they are a huge blast of radiation, and these are there is some plasma ejection from the sun with these solar flares, but it's mainly the predominant energy is X-rays. And of course, these X-rays and some gamma rays. And these do travel at the speed of light. So whereas on a CME, we've got 93 hours traveling at 1 million miles an hour, 93 million miles away, we've got satellites, solar observing satellites that monitor for CMEs, and we get about 90 plus hours of notification. Solar flares, on the other hand, travel at, they're electromagnetic, and they travel at the speed of light. And so they hit us in a little over 8 minutes. And very strong disruption of communications. Our ham radio friends out there know all about solar flares and how they can disrupt the communications. Okay, so that's any questions about our sun and the layers and the energies and the structures coming off the sun? All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to just kind of quickly go through the types of solar scopes you can put together, and we're going to cover the entire range of costs of solar telescopes. And of course, the simplest thing, the easiest entry path is just to put a aperture filter, which is a full spectrum. You're letting in all the light from the sun, spectrum-wise, wavelength-wise. So you're seeing all the wavelengths coming from the sun. And so you're going to get a white image, and what these filters are doing when you put them on your primary aperture opening is you're just knocking out 99.9% of the light, but what's coming through to your camera or your eyepiece is in fact a broad spectrum light. Anybody have these type of solar filters on their telescopes?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah.
I believe there's one in the loaner scope that I brought home this week.
Yeah. Great. It's a great way to get started. And of course, all you're going to see with this kind of filter, because it's so dominant, is you're going to see the broad spectrum light from the photosphere, but you will see sunspots, and you will see the granules, and based on what kind of broad, there's some other broad band filtering that you can use that will actually enhance this a little bit. But typically with these mylar or glass filters that you put on your aperture, this is the kind of image that you're going to see. You're going You're not going to see any prominences or filaments or flages or flares or any of the. So you will not see the chromosphere at all. The broad spectrum light from the photosphere will wash out all those delicate details in the chromosphere. Now, a next step up, a little bit more sophisticated approach to broad spectrum imaging is something called a Herschel wedge. This is really a very cool device. I think Gabe has one, and
Yeah, I have one too. They're great.
Matt, you got a
Yeah, the one thing I'll add about them that's really nice is it's basically got a track. You can have a finder scope built in because all that light that's dissipating from the light trap is a great way to easily point your scope to without having to have the extra finder.
Yeah, and in fact, what let's see. Oh, I actually have a pointer. So what Matt is talking about, if you look at the structure here, so we got the light coming in. There is a prism here that is 95.4% transparent, and just a microscopic thin coating of reflective material, and so only about 4 or 5% of the sun's light is being reflected off the prism. But there is this light trap in the back. It's a ceramic plate that's absorbing. So you can make your pancakes and keep your lunch warm back here, but you'll actually see an image of the sun. So you can use this Herschel wedge as a way of centering the sun, and I'll show you this in the next slide. And then this 4% is still way too much for most cameras. And typically there's another neutral density filter that will knock that down, down to like only 0.1% of the intensity before it hits your eyeball or your camera.
Yeah. Vader has a photographer's version, which includes the continuity filter as well as the neutral density, a few different versions of them. That you can add on, and then really, if you feel the back, it's not hot anymore. I think that might have been some of the older models that get hot in the back, but the new one, I can't even feel any heat. Really.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Well, good. Well, that's it's good to know from and I will emphasize this more than once here is safety in doing solar imaging. You do have to be careful. When you're changing filters, or you always want to slew away from the sun before you make any changes at all to your optical train. And so here it is in action, and so you can see the sun shows up on this ceramic plate in the back. And then in this particular case, there's a camera attached. Now the Herschel wedge does really a really nice job of now again, you got to be careful when you see these color pictures. And we'll review some physics, but H alpha, if you're using a color camera, this image, and if you don't do any photoshopping processing, this image is going to be red, and for whatever reason, some of us astrophotographers, and maybe it comes back from our school days when we were drawing pictures of the sun with our yellow crayons. So there may be some evolutionary process going on here in some of our photographers. So if you're using a monochrome camera, this is going to be a grayscale image, and then we colorize it to add the color to the sun. Now the sun is not yellow, and you can prove that to yourself every winter. The sun is predominantly white white light. The balance of the spectrum of the sun gives us near white light. And you can prove that to yourself every winter if you look down at the snow, which reflects 99% of the sunlight. Snow is white, and we all know that yellow snow is not very good. So the colors that we see here, and I'll show you my images. We add the color, so the sun is not this color. Now, one of the nice things, this is an image from a Herschel wedge, and you can see in really nice detail these granules. And remember, these are all the size of Texas. Okay, and so now I have a real hard time. This is a personal thing for me, and the little hairs go up in the back of my head. A lot of folks, a lot of very professional, very advanced imagers will actually label sunspots as the dark spot portion as being umbra and penumbra. I don't know why that bothers me. These were obviously stolen from the eclipse world. These are not shadows. These are temperature differentials, and so this nomenclature, you will see it all the time. And okay, enough said, because I'll go on a rant about this kind of labeling. But you can see this Herschel wedge really does a nice job. But again, you're looking at just the photosphere. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go up from the photosphere, and we're going to go into where all of the real action is at. And the only thing you're sacrificing when you move up to the chromosphere is the ability to see the granules, because what we're going to do is we're going to rely on the fact that the chromosphere is all ionized hydrogen, and we're going to selectively image and do extreme narrowband imaging of hydrogen alpha. And in that case, we'll be able to filter out all of the off wavelength light from the photosphere and see the very fine details of the chromosphere. We will now pick up the flages and flares and filaments and prominences and all the turbulent activity within the chromosphere. And so, I forgot to take this slide out, but since I was talking to a bunch of physics folks, as you all know, we kind of misuse the word ionized. So when a gas is ionized, it does not give off any light, right? So an ionized atom basically kicks the electrons out of their orbits, either up to higher orbits or out of the atom entirely. So now you're just looking at a proton nucleus. It's when the electron reionizes, rejoins the atom. It joins it at a much higher energy level, and when it drops down to the first energy level, that's when a photon is given off, and that photon is at exactly 656 nanometers, and it is the wavelength of a hydrogen ion photon, or reionized hydrogen. Okay, and so we for those of us who do narrowband imaging, we in fact use narrowband, but relative to the sun, that's just not narrow enough. We use 5 nanometer filters, but that's about 50 angstroms, and that's just still letting in way too much light from the photosphere. So what we use is a new type of filter. It's called an Etalon filter, and this thing is just really a a physicist's delight. And what it is it's two reflecting plates with internal reflecting surfaces. But the gap in this gap is the wavelength of hydrogen. Okay? And so this Etalon filter only passes the matching wavelength of the cavity. And so now I've already told you twice as much as I know about the physics behind that, but suffice to know that, and keep this in mind, is as we adjust these plates, we allow more or less of the hydrogen light through them. It's essentially the center frequency or wavelength of this filter is 656, but then by changing the gap, we can change the band pass. So we can either let more or less light around the center frequency to go through this filter. Okay. Did that make sense? Anybody? Did I lose anybody on that? So entry level. So telescopes that can do hydrogen alpha that are built to have hydrogen alpha filters. Coronado and Lunt are two of the most popular. These telescopes use an older technique of what's called a pressure chamber, and so this Etalon filter is in a chamber, a pressure chamber, and by cranking this knob, you're changing the pressure within that chamber, and that moves these reflective plates either closer or farther apart from each other. Okay, I really never liked doing those adjustments, especially with all the warnings that say that every once in a while you've got to burp this chamber and remove the piston, and big cautionary notes: beware of cross threading. And so there are some hazards associated with this technique. Now, in order to get down to half of angstroms, these previous, I believe this Coronado has, I think it has 2 Etalons in it that will get it down to a half of angstrom. This particular Lunt only gives us a 0.75 angstrom bandpass, so it's not as sharp as image. Now, pull out your wallet, and for $3,800 or all the way up to $7,000, you can get a double cell Etalon and get down to that sweet spot of a half of angstrom that really shows a tremendous amount of detail on the photosphere or on the chromosphere. Now, for folks who know me, I am extremely lazy, and burping solar telescopes is not high on my list. But there's some new technology out now that is just simplifies everything tremendously. And this is a device by Daystar called the Quark system. Again, this uses an Etalon filter in here, but the reflecting plates are made out of mica, and by controlling the temperature from like 100 degrees to 150 degrees, you can expand and contract the Etalon filter and adjust the bandpass by just clicking this knob in either direction. So one click to the left changes the bandpass of the Etalon filter by 1/10 of an angstrom. And so the center position is a half an angstrom, and you go 0.4, 0.3, and all the way down to 0.2, and the same in, you know, the other direction, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. This is a marvelous device. It is a little pricey, but in comparison to the other scopes, this is for the kind of accuracy that you can get with this filter. It's just more than worth the price. And so it attaches the same way. You in front of the cork, you put a you know, a UV and an IR filter, and then the cork takes care of the rest, and then you know, either an eyepiece or a camera. And so what I did is remember that $7,000 or $8,000 lunt, that was an 80 millimeter scope aperture. Now, people always say, well, gosh, you don't need aperture. You got enough light, so it's not about light gathering, what larger apertures would do for you, but you got to remember, the same physics applies to the sun. Is the resolution goes up with the aperture, and so so the other thing, so what you can do is you can put together with this quark system your own solar telescope for a fraction of the cost of a lunt or a coronado, and so. And remember, we're only looking at one extremely narrow wavelength of hydrogen alpha, and so literally a doublet is all you need here. And Gabe had recommended to me a really nice doublet. You do want to have a fairly sophisticated focusing system on it, so that's where you are paying a little extra. But for $650, you can get this is a 102 millimeter Astrotech that works just absolutely beautifully. And so if you look at the cost of a doublet, around $600 or so, the Daystar at $1295, that UV IR filter from Daystar is $125. You got to use an 80 millimeter 2-inch extension, next to no cost. But I built my entire solar telescope for just a little over $2,000, as compared to Lunt's $7,000 price tag, and I have 20 millimeters more aperture than the Lunt. The camera that I'm using is a really sweetheart camera. It's a very high-speed camera from ZWO. It's the ASI 174. It is a monochrome camera. Again, you don't need the sensitivity of monochrome, but since I do my own colorization, I just prefer using the monochrome. But it is a USB 3 camera. With fairly decent resolution. I guess this would fall into the category also of a planetary camera. But this puppy can do all the way up to 164 frames per second, and so you can get a lot of imaging in a very short period of time, and it's only $500. Okay. By the way, I'm being, you know, when I say only this 500, only a 1,200 here. You know, there's an old saying: if you become an astrophotographer, you can become a millionaire. But that's only if you start out as a billionaire. Okay, so this can be an expensive hobby. One thing that I learned the hard way is my first image, gosh, had all kinds of rings in it, and of course the more experienced astrophotographers in our group quickly pointed out that these were Newton's rings. Thanks, Newton. And basically they're interference patterns, as you can well imagine, and they're caused by there's a little glass plate that covers up the CMOS detector. And that little gap in there, if you don't have the alignment of the light cone coming in perfectly correct, then you will get these interference patterns. And so for a little addition of 48 bucks, you can put a tilt plate on the front of your camera, and in a matter of minutes, I was able to fine tune these, and Newton can rest easy now in his grave. I just threw this in for a different audience. Somebody asked about mounts. You really don't need all that sophisticated of a mount or with any kind of heavy capacity. And here I would even recommend buying a used mount. These are list price, but you can get a good used mount for solar work for probably less than $500. So this is my setup. You know, I have a Takahashi 130 as my primary deep sky imaging, and since I've already had the mount that has, you know, this is a big Paramount that has 100-pound capacity, so I was able to easily piggyback the solar scope on the my deep sky system. So these are just coming, you know, I tell you, whenever I do imaging and I'm scanning, you know, the surface of the sun, and you're doing that with a video camera, by the way, and so you're looking for real, you know, looking at real-time activity. It's not as pretty and sharp as this, and I'll show you in a minute. But you know, the views are just spectacular. You can see, in fact, here's a filament or / prominence that you can actually see originating from this sunspot, rising up at an angle, and then coming back down. And then here's that flash area that's associated, that high energy area is associated around the sunspots. You see a little prominence activity here on the surface. Again, you know, the images. These are some dual sunspots. You know, we're getting into a very active phase of the sun right now, and but I just enjoy the heck out of seeing these kinds of images. So now I have no life at all. I'm imaging in the evening and imaging during the day, and so I'm now 100% consumed as long as the weather cooperates. And so I'm just going to real quickly, these last couple slides, all the software I use, except for the last step for acquiring and sharpening, and is all free software. I use SharpCap to control the camera, the video camera. And it just does a marvelous job of adjusting the exposure rates and the gain of the camera. It's just a phenomenal, and you got a histogram down here where you can optimize, you know, the gain and exposure settings. And so this is a live image. That's interesting. I don't normally save these are 3,000 frame images that I typically take. So I had to hurry up when I knew I had to give that talk at Marquette. I process, you know, I do the analysis of the videos and collect the good frames, and then I throw away the raw videos. All right, so let me just run. So what you're seeing here, so this is what my neighbors and folks see, and we go across the sun and look for sunspots and prominences, and it's really very exciting. You just can't help being excited about this. So again, a great program. So I take those 3,000 frame video files throw them in another program called Auto Stacker, and I have it look for like 15% of the best frames out of the 3,000, and then what it does is it saves those frames, integrates them, stacks them, and then gives me a TIFF file of the 15 best frames. We affectionately refer to this as lucky imaging, and that's what you're doing. As you know, it's a double sword affecting your focus. Not only is the surface of the sun very turbulent and its atmosphere, but then those poor photons have to make it through our atmosphere as well. So Auto Stacker then sorts through all of that mess and gives me the best possible frames. Another program I started using, it's a sharpening program. It's called IMPPG. Again, it's a free program. It has two sharpening. It has a Lucy Richardson deconvolution algorithm, as well as an unsharp masking algorithm. So there's two sharpening programs here, and you can really enhance and sharpen, and then also play with the contrast and brightness. So and again, one program. A lot of people use Registack. I used to use it as well, but I found this program to be even more superior because it actually uses two different algorithms to do the sharpening. Then finally, the last step, which is not free, and again, this goes back to my kindergarten days of making yellow suns, and so I come into Photoshop and colorize the image and do a little more contrast and enhancement. And then finally, here is the final image. This is not as exciting as the other images that I was showing, but this was something that I just did a couple of days before this Marquette presentation, because I discovered I had no video files to show, and so I hurried up, opened up the observatory, and just quickly did this one image. So finally, I just want to emphasize how dangerous it can be doing solar images. And we've had one member, Jeff, had gotten a serious burn on his hand. He forgot to slew away from the sun, and he was changing a filter. This poor guy actually forgot to put on his solar filter, and but ended up with a really nice projection of the sun and the sunspots on the wall of his house. Okay, so with that, gosh, feel free to contact me. I should add Slack on this list, but I am tuned in everywhere, and you can go to my website and see some of my work. But easiest thing to do is to get a hold of me on Slack, and be happy to answer any questions at this point. And so if I can figure, yeah, stop presenting. Okay, any questions? We're at the end at this point, and also feel free to ask any questions on Slack as well. Huh? Anybody? Cool. Well, hopefully, if you want to get started in solar imaging, feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to get you going.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Dennis.
Ah, great. My pleasure. I always like to reuse presentations. All right, so if anybody has any other thing they want to discuss, if not, we can. Matt, have you stopped recording at this point, or?
Yep, we're
Okay, good.
Hey, so this is Bob Hamers. I had to join late, so I missed whatever might have been said at the beginning. Is this once a month on a particular Wednesday? Is it always the second Wednesday of the month, or what's the schedule like?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Second Wednesday of every month at 7 o'clock.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And please join the notification list and put it in your Google Calendar or whatever. But what's nice is this, Bob, it's the same link. So all you have to do is just save this link and put it on your own paper calendar if you like. But we use the same link every month.
Great.
Yeah. Cool.